I sleep better now. That's the first thing I noticed. Not deeper, not longer, just better. No shifting for space, no waiting for someone else's breath to settle, no turning away from the glow of a phone screen held too close. Just stillness, my stillness. And that's not something I'm supposed to say out loud, is it? That life, my life, got better when I was finally alone. But it did, and I'm not going to dress it up. I'm not going to wrap it in self-care or personal growth or whatever phrase makes it more digestible. I'm just telling you what happened. I woke up one morning and the silence didn't scare me anymore. It felt clean, like the first breath after a long underwater stretch. And I knew right then I wasn't going back, not because someone hurt me, not because I'd given up on love, but because for the first time in decades, I wasn't performing. I wasn't translating myself into someone else's language. I wasn't adjusting my volume, my pace, my needs. I was just here, present. And yes, I know what this sounds like. Cold, detached, maybe even bitter. But I'm not bitter, I'm not angry, I'm just honest. And maybe that's the part no one prepares you for. That honesty doesn't always come with softness. Sometimes it comes with sharp edges, like saying, I didn't lose anything when the relationship ended. I gained space, I gained quiet. I gained the version of myself I used to meet only in short, guilty moments. The me who walks barefoot across a cool floor at midnight without explaining why, who eats standing up over the sink because it feels good, who listens to the same song 7 times without someone asking if everything's okay. That version wasn't broken, it was buried, and now, finally, it has air. So no, I'm not mourning the partnership. I'm not aching for a return. I'm not watching the door. I'm living in a house that fits me. And that's not loneliness, that's arrival. I know people don't want to hear this, but most of what we call companionship is just noise, a buffer against ourselves. I didn't understand that for most of my life. I thought I needed someone beside me, someone to fill the evenings, to share meals with, to trade sighs about the little frustrations. That's what we're taught, right? That a good life is a shared life, that a quiet room with one chair means failure. But now that I live alone, really alone, not just between relationships, not waiting for the next, I see how much of my past was spent translating my thoughts into something acceptable, something digestible. I used to rehearse sentences in my head before speaking, soften opinions, round off the edges, not because I was afraid, but because coexisting demands that. You make space, you negotiate, you dull your appetite for solitude because it's seen as selfish. And when I finally stopped, when the last door closed and no one came back, I was left with a version of myself I barely recognized, not because he was broken, but because he was quiet, and he liked it that way. He didn't want the music on all the time. He didn't need a second cup poured. He didn't miss the murmurs from the other side of the bed. And when that realization landed, that this wasn't a phase or a depression or a wound to be healed, I felt relief. Actual relief, the kind that makes your shoulders drop without you realizing. I wasn't lonely, I was uninterrupted, and that distinction changed everything. It made me rethink all the years I'd spent chasing connection like it was oxygen. Turns out I was just suffocating under the idea that wholeness requires witness. It doesn't, not always. Sometimes it just requires honesty, the kind that sits across from you in silence and doesn't ask you to be anything else. That's what I have now, not absence, not lack, just a room that doesn't lie to me, a life that doesn't ask for translation. And I know that sounds bleak to some people, But to me, it's the first real peace I've ever known. I used to be good at playing the part, not just in relationships, but in the idea of being with someone. The small rituals, sharing a meal, asking about their day, holding hands in public like a symbol. They were easy, rehearsed. I knew the timing, the rhythm, the right smile at the right moment. I knew how to look like I belonged to someone, how to fill the silence with questions that didn't really want answers. And maybe they did the same with me. That's the part I try not to dwell on too long, because if I start picking at that thread, how much of it was real, how much was performance, I don't know where it ends. But what I do know is this: presence is not connection. It took me years to understand that. You can share a bed, a mortgage, a life, and still feel like a stranger in your own skin. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it with distance, the kind that comes from finally stepping outside the frame. I was dependable. I remembered anniversaries. I cleared my schedule when they were sick. I was thoughtful, attentive, the kind of partner people describe as solid. But I was never fully there. Not really. I kept a part of myself tucked away. The part that didn't want to be read, didn't want to be understood, didn't want to be needed. And the older I got, the more that part grew, not out of cruelty, out of exhaustion. It's hard work, shaping yourself around someone else's outline. And the more I did it, the more I resented the quiet parts of me that didn't fit the role. So I buried them, numbed them, told myself this was what love looked like: a compromise, a merging, a sacrifice. But now, in the quiet of this life I live alone, I see it for what it was, a series of well-meaning edits. And when the edits stop and you're left with just the raw, unshaped version of yourself, it's terrifying at first, but then it's freeing, because what remains isn't broken. It's just real, and real doesn't always look like romance. Sometimes it looks like drinking your morning coffee in silence and not needing anyone to witness it, not needing to be seen to feel whole. I remember the first time I sat at a restaurant table alone and didn't reach for my phone. It wasn't a decision, more like a realization halfway through the meal. The noise around me faded, and I noticed how the fork felt in my hand, how the water tasted, how the air moved when someone opened the door. No performance, no small talk, no soft negotiation about what to order or whether we'd share dessert, just me and the strange, steady presence of myself. That was the moment I knew I wasn't coming back to the old shape. The shape where everything is measured by how well it fits someone else's outline. And here's the part people don't say out loud: being alone isn't lonely. Performing partnership is. Smiling when you want silence, explaining when you need space, softening your thoughts until they're unrecognizable. We call that love sometimes. We call it maturity, compromise. But what if it's just fear? Fear of being seen in full, fear of not being chosen, fear of being left to face yourself. I've stopped calling it love when I erase myself to make someone else comfortable. I've stopped mistaking endurance for closeness, because what I had all those years was not intimacy. It was proximity, a life built side by side, never quite overlapping. And no one tells you that's possible, that you can be two good people doing your best and still never really meet. We think breaking up requires betrayal, cruelty, something dramatic, but sometimes it's just the slow, silent weight of never being fully known. And I think that's what finally made me stop chasing it. I didn't want another warm body beside me if it meant going back to being partially invisible. I didn't want to be loved for my usefulness, my consistency, my ability to smooth over tension. I wanted to be seen, even in my silence, even in my stillness, even when I had nothing to offer but my presence. And when I realized I might never find that with someone else, I stopped looking. I chose myself, not as a last resort, but as a quiet act of return. There's something no one prepares you for when you start living alone, the slow dismantling of the habits you built to be tolerable. You don't even realize how much of yourself was constructed until there's no one left to perform for, no second toothbrush in the holder, no coat hanging beside yours, no background noise of another person existing in the same space. At first, that silence feels like a hole, like something is missing. You find yourself setting the table for two without thinking, pausing at the sound of a key that isn't turning, reaching for a conversation that isn't there. And then one day, the absence stops feeling like a wound. It starts feeling like clarity, like someone finally turned off a low, buzzing light you'd grown so used to, you forgot it was even on. And in that clarity, you begin to notice the small things, how you arrange your pillows, how you hum when you cook, how the house breathes when no one's watching. You start making choices without consultation, without compromise, without the invisible need to be interpreted. And it's not rebellion, it's not selfishness, it's just freedom. The kind that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't come with fireworks or declarations, but settles in like sunlight through a window you didn't know could open. You wear what you want, you eat when you're hungry, you let the laundry pile up if you feel like it. And no one sighs, no one asks questions, no one reminds you of some invisible standard you were supposed to uphold. The pressure dissolves, not suddenly but slowly, like a muscle unclenching after years of tension. And here's the part people rarely admit. Sometimes being in a relationship means constantly managing how you are perceived. Every sigh might be misread. Every silence might be questioned. You begin to monitor your face, your tone, your space, not because anyone's doing anything wrong, just because proximity demands translation. And I got tired of translating. I got tired of performing understanding when I felt confusion, of giving comfort when I needed solitude, of offering softness when I was brittle inside. Living alone stripped all that away. It left me with just the raw, unedited version of myself. And that was terrifying, because without the shape someone else carved into me, I wasn't sure what I looked like. But now I know I'm quieter than I thought, less social, more careful with my energy. I like long silences, slow mornings, unread books stacked by the bed. I like the feeling of knowing that no one will walk in and need me when I have nothing to give. I like not apologizing for needing space, for taking up space, for simply being. And maybe that sounds bleak to someone who's still searching for their person. But to me, it's not bleak. It's spacious. It's sacred. It's the life I never knew I was allowed to want. Sometimes I think about the version of me that existed inside the relationship, not the dramatic parts, not the arguments or compromises, but the quiet erasures. The way I'd adjust my body on the couch to make more space, even when I was already hanging off the edge. The way I'd mute my opinions on movies, meals, even music, because it was easier to agree. The way I'd push my wants to the weekend, to the background, to the next time. Not because I was oppressed, not because they asked me to, but because I thought that's what it meant to love. To make room, to stay soft, to not take up too much air, and when it ended, not suddenly, but with the quiet collapse of things unsaid. I didn't know how to breathe in a space that was entirely mine. I'd walk from room to room in the first few weeks, unsure of where to stand, what to do with the silence. It felt too large, like it would echo my thoughts back too honestly. But the silence never mocked me. It waited. It held me without expectation. It didn't ask me to be charming or forgiving or available. And slowly, I began to realize I had mistaken tension for connection, that the constant scanning of someone else's mood, the delicate negotiation of everyday things, what to eat, what to watch, when to speak, wasn't intimacy. It was survival, and I had mastered it. I was good at it, but it drained something in me that I hadn't noticed until it stopped. And when it stopped, I grieved. Not the person, not the partnership, but the version of myself I had worked so hard to compress into acceptability. That grief was quiet. It didn't come in sobs or sleepless nights. It came in small, jarring recognitions. How I'd automatically ask for permission to make plans. How I'd hesitate before buying something I liked, checking for a reaction that would never come. How I'd apologize out of habit, even when there was no one to hear it. I was still haunted by the rules of togetherness, even in solitude, and I had to unlearn them. I had to practice being selfish in the purest sense, not in cruelty, but in reclamation, reclaiming my time, my space, my desires. I started saying no to things I didn't want, even if it disappointed people. I stopped explaining myself. I let the laundry sit. I left messages unanswered, not out of defiance, but out of quiet alignment with myself. And with every no, I made room for the yes that mattered, the yes to stillness, to solitude, to a life that didn't require negotiation. I stopped fearing the empty bed. I stopped measuring my worth by my ability to be needed, and in that space something unexpected grew, contentment, not joy, not thrill, just a deep, steady ease that asked nothing of me, except that I remain honest. And once I tasted that kind of ease, I knew I could never go back, not because I hated the past, but because I'd finally learned what it felt like to belong to myself. The hardest part to admit, even now, is that I feel safer like this. Not happier, not more fulfilled in some grand romantic way, but safer. And safety, I've learned, is underrated. There's a kind of safety that comes from not being scrutinized, from not having to explain why your mood shifted or why you got quiet during dinner, from not having to fold your exhaustion into a smile because someone else needs your light. I didn't know how much of my life had been shaped by those small calculations, the constant balancing act of being understood without being too much, too quiet, too loud, too withdrawn, too intense. I used to think that was just part of being human, part of being in love, adapting, bending, becoming palatable. But over time, I lost the shape of my own wants. I couldn't even hear them clearly anymore. And when the relationship ended, I realized I'd been waiting for someone to hand me permission to be myself. That permission never came, not from them, not from anyone. And eventually, I stopped waiting. I started giving it to myself, and it didn't look dramatic. It looked like going to the grocery store at 9 p.m. just because I wanted silence in the aisles. It looked like leaving my phone in another room for hours, not because I was busy, but because I didn't want to be reachable. It looked like waking up without pressure to narrate my morning, to greet someone with the right tone, to hold the emotional temperature of a house together. And people say, "Don't you miss companionship? Don't you miss sharing your day with someone?" And the honest answer is, not really. I don't miss narrating my life. I don't miss translating my silences. I don't miss pretending that compromise always feels like a gift. What I do miss sometimes is touch. the accidental brush of an arm, the weight of a hand on my back. But I've learned not to confuse that hunger for connection with a hunger to be coupled. I can crave warmth without craving arrangement. And when the loneliness does come, because yes, sometimes it does, it passes. It doesn't erode me. It doesn't make me doubt my choice. It just visits like weather, and then it goes, and in its place is this life, quiet, sturdy, mine, a life where I can exist without decoding myself for someone else, where I don't have to earn peace by shrinking. I know what the world thinks of that if you live alone for too long, you become hard, unreachable. But that's not what happened to me. I didn't become hard. I became precise about what I need, about what I'm willing to give, about what love should feel like. Not just the giving, but the being allowed to exist fully, without pretense. And if that never arrives again in the form of another person, I can live with that. I can live with this. Because this is the first version of me that isn't diluted, isn't bent around someone else's shape. This is me, unguarded, unperformed, unapologetic, and it's enough. I won't tell you this is better. I won't pretend I've discovered some higher path or unlocked a secret other people are too afraid to face. I don't believe in those stories anymore. The ones where solitude makes you wiser or being alone automatically means you've grown. Sometimes it just means you're alone, and that's it. But what I will say, what I can say, is that this life, this shape I've grown into, fits. Not in the way clothes fit when you lose weight, or plans fit when they finally align. No, it fits like quiet fits a tired room, like stillness fits a body that's spent too long bracing. There's no glory in it, no revelation, just breath, just quiet, just the absence of constant resistance. And I don't expect anyone to understand. I don't need them to. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not asking for your agreement or admiration or concern. I'm just telling the truth, mine, the one I carried for years in silence because I thought it would make me seem cold, the one I buried under compromise and performance and hope, the one that whispered to me in empty rooms and long drives and late nights, staring at a ceiling that never blinked back. That whisper finally got loud enough to become a voice, and now it's spoken. I don't miss being partnered. I don't miss being chosen. I don't miss being seen through someone else's eyes. What I needed, what I always needed, was to see myself without distortion, without demand, without the low-level panic of trying to be lovable every day. And now I do. Not always kindly, not always proudly, but honestly. And that's enough. That's what I sit with now, in the evenings when the sky goes dark and no one asks what I want for dinner. That's what fills the space where a voice might have been, where a hand might have reached. Not emptiness, not regret, just this quiet, steady knowing I didn't lose anything. I returned. And if you've made it this far, if your stomach feels strange and something in your chest went still for a second, then maybe you've heard it too. That whisper, that tug, that low, persistent knowing that you've been playing a role you no longer recognize. And if that's true, if even part of you feels it, then you're not alone, not really. You're just early or late, or maybe finally right on time.